K.K. Downing, a name emblematic of fierce dual guitar riffs, the legendary Flying V, and decades of commitment to Judas Priest. However, after over 40 years of influencing heavy metal history, he departed in an unsettling silence. No ado, no elaborate departure, merely unresolved inquiries. As a foundational member of Judas Priest, Downing, together with Glenn Tipton and Rob Halford, elevated the band from obscurity to a metal force. Tracks such as Breaking the Law, Living After Midnight, and Painkiller all exhibit his distinctive signature. However, underlying the grandeur, internal discord persists. As Downing grew stronger, he ultimately recognized that he no longer belonged to the band he had helped establish. What prompted a legend such as KK? Did Downing depart from Judas Priest while the band was still at its zenith? Was it genuinely his decision or an unavoidable result of years of internal conflict? Moreover, has he ever received appropriate acknowledgement for his significant contributions to Judas Priest? K.K. Downing's life is not merely the narrative of an extraordinary guitarist, it is the odyssey of a solitary artist perpetually striving for his appropriate position within the band he co-founded. Join us as we explore his journey from a defiant youth in West Bromwich to a heavy metal icon, ultimately becoming a man marginalized by his own band. Early life. Kenneth Keith Downing Jr., commonly referred to as KK. Downing was born on October 27, 1951, in West Bromwich, England. Raised in a working-class family, Downing did not enjoy the perfect upbringing that many others may have had. His parents, both laborers, exerted considerable effort to sustain their family in the challenging post-war British economy. His father was a stringent, conventional individual who exhibited no tolerance for insubordination or any deviation from the established norm. Kenny's mother lacked a distinct affinity for music, consequently providing minimal encouragement for him to pursue artistic ambitions. From a young age, Downing exhibited a defiant disposition and profound discontent with his environment. He abhorred the inflexible framework of his household and harbored an even deeper contempt for the severe British educational system of that era. At the age of 15, he took a daring yet precarious decision. He withdrew from school. Without qualifications and a defined trajectory, Downing was compelled to traverse a realm that offered scant opportunities for individuals deviating from traditional pathways. Shortly after graduating, he immersed himself in a reckless lifestyle characterized by alcohol, cannabis, and incessant revelry. Similar to numerous young individuals engaged in the rock and roll culture of that period, he undertook various menial jobs to sustain himself, yet none captivated his interest. His anger with mundane existence intensified, and he perceived only one escape: music. Had Downing merely been a defiant adolescent, he could have become yet another forsaken individual amidst the desolate industrial terrains of England. Music served as his salvation. Upon first encountering artists such as Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, and Cream, he was utterly enthralled by the visceral intensity and unrestrained dynamism of the electric guitar. By the late 1960s, Downing encountered Ian Hill, a young bassist who also hailed from West Bromwich. The two rapidly forged a connection through their mutual enthusiasm for music. Hill transcended the role of a mere friend. He was the individual who guided Downing towards a substantial musical career. They commenced deliberations on the concept of establishing a band, and shortly thereafter, the foundation of Judas Priest began to materialize. At this juncture, Downing remained an inexperienced guitarist lacking a robust technical foundation. However, his distinguishing traits were his insatiable ambition and unwavering resolve. He practiced relentlessly, honing his skills and uncovering his distinctive style, an aggressive, high-energy methodology that would subsequently characterize Judas Priest's signature sound. Despite originating from modest circumstances and experiencing a tumultuous adolescence, K.K. Downing harnessed his frustrations and rebellious nature as the impetus for transformative change in his life. The hardships, the scant sustenance, the restless nights dedicated to practice, all served as pivotal milestones on his journey to becoming a heavy metal icon. At that moment, Downing was unaware that the expedition he and Ian Hill were undertaking would not only transform their lives but also disrupt the fundamental principles of rock music. Initial professional phase. The initial period of Judas Priest was characterized not by triumph or spectacular performances, but rather by an unyielding fight for existence. KK Downing and Ian Hill established the band driven solely by passion and a vision that few were willing to chase. During that period, blues rock predominated the music scene, and heavy metal had not yet emerged as a separate genre. However, Downing was convinced that Judas Priest could produce something distinct, more potent and incisive than anything previously available. Initially, Judas Priest performed at various venues, ranging from local bars to small halls. They lacked a record contract, professional management, and adequate equipment. Performing on confined stages with inadequate sound systems and minimal audiences became customary. Rather than feeling disheartened, Downing perceived it as a challenge. An endurance test and a chance to refine his skills while defining the band's identity. Despite his and Ian Hill's efforts to sustain Judas Priest, Downing remained discontent with their prevailing condition. He desired the band to be more powerful, intense, and wholly unique compared to contemporaneous acts. However, the primary challenge was that Judas Priest did not possess a consistent lineup. The band experienced several lead singer changes, complicating Downing's ability to articulate the band's sound as he had envisioned. In 1973, a significant transformation occurred with the addition of Rob Halford. His elevated, potent vocals revealed a completely new potential for Judas Priest. Unencumbered by the restrictions of former vocalists, Downing was able to elevate the band's music to a new echelon. Quicker, more substantial, more acute. Despite Halford's presence, one essential element remained absent. An additional guitarist capable of enhancing Downing's performance. The absence was promptly addressed with the addition of Glenn Tipton, thereby solidifying the formation of Judas Priest as it would ultimately be recognized globally. The trio of Downing, Tipton, and Halford constituted the foundation of Judas Priest, the catalyst that would elevate them from obscurity to heavy metal icons. Tipton's arrival enabled Downing to realize his vision of dual guitar harmonies, where both guitars not only supplied rhythm but collaborated to produce intricate riffs and soaring solos. This was unprecedented in conventional blues rock and became a defining trait of Judas Priest, solidifying their status as pioneers of heavy metal. Despite possessing a formidable lineup, Judas Priest confronted a stark reality. They required a recording contract to achieve significant success. Following years of adversity, they ultimately secured a contract with Gull Records, and in 1974, their inaugural album, Rockaralla, was launched. For Downing, it represented a significant achievement, yet simultaneously a source of disillusionment. The album failed to embody the sound he had conceptualized. It remained excessively influenced by blues, too subdued in comparison to the music igniting in his mind. Rather than retreating, Downing utilized it as motivation to advance Judas Priest. He and Tipton commenced experimenting with a denser, more assertive sound, incisive riffs, and accelerated tempos, all in anticipation of their significant breakthrough. The pivotal moment occurred in 1976 with the release of Sad Wings of Destiny, the album that transformed everything. Through tracks such as Victim of Changes and The Ripper, Judas Priest unequivocally embraced the domain of pure heavy metal, discarding the final vestiges of their blues rock influences. The band had ceased its quest for a distinct sound. This band was poised for domination. Central to this transformation was KK Downing, the catalyst for transforming Judas Priest from an obscure band into a formidable force that would disrupt the rock music landscape. They had transcended the status of merely another band performing in minor pubs. They possessed a recording contract, a distinctive sound, and, most crucially, a lucid vision for the future. This was merely the inception. Heavy metal was an emerging genre, and its potential remained uncertain. However, Downing was not required to be informed. He was aware that Judas Priest was fated to achieve legendary status, and he was determined to do whatever was necessary to realize that ambition. Judas Priest's pinnacle years. Upon the release of Sad Wings of Destiny in 1976, Judas Priest definitively emerged from the influence of conventional blues rock bands and established their position in the realm of heavy metal. KK Downing, with his incisive riffs and authoritative playing style, transformed Judas Priest's sound into an instrument of devastation. However, attaining the pinnacle necessitated more than mere brute strength. The band required a distinct identity, a hallmark image, and, most importantly, compositions that could characterize an entire genre. In 1977, Judas Priest entered into a contract with Columbia Records, signifying the commencement of a completely new era. Transcending their previous status as an underground band constrained by minimal resources and inadequate equipment, they now possessed the opportunity to broaden their audience. However, this also entailed the obligation to produce innovative content that would distinguish Judas Priest from all other bands globally. At this juncture, Downing had completely refined his playing technique and, alongside Glenn Tipton, immersed himself in songwriting, exploring more audacious and aggressive concepts. The limitations of the past had dissipated. Blues rock was entirely forsaken in favor of more incisive, rapid, and potent compositions. Within a mere 3 years, Judas Priest produced a series of groundbreaking albums, including Stained Class in 1978 and Hellbent for Leather in 1979. This was the era when they not only developed their sound but also cultivated an iconic image. Judas Priest debuted adorned in black leather, studs, and a distinctly provocative aesthetic. If heavy metal had previously retained aspects of hard rock, it was they who metamorphosed it into something wholly unique. K.K. Downing, characterized by his lengthy hair, iconic flying V guitar, and dynamic stage presence, emerged as one of the inaugural heavy metal guitar legends. However, all their accomplishments prior to 1980 diminished in significance when compared to British Steel, an album esteemed as one of the paramount milestones in metal history. At this point, Downing and Tipton, possessing more than 10 years of experience, had refined their songwriting skills. Tracks such as Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight achieved an ideal equilibrium between unrefined intensity and commercial allure. These songs transcended the metal genre, appealing to a wider audience, attracting individuals who had never previously engaged with Judas Priest. Heavy metal, for the first time, transcended the underground scene and integrated into popular culture. Following British Steel, Judas Priest commenced the 1980s as one of the preeminent metal bands globally. This era was characterized by extensive tours, filled arenas, and consecutive album releases without indications of deceleration. Downing and Tipton persistently honed their dual guitar approach, enhancing its seamlessness and dynamism with each successive album. Screaming for Vengeance, released in 1982, not only solidified their supremacy but also catalyzed their commercial triumph. The song You've Got Another Thing Comin' emerged as a defining metal anthem of the decade, enhancing Judas Priest's influence in America and solidifying their status as one of the best-selling rock acts of the era. However, for Downing, success never equated to complacency. He consistently sought methods to elevate Judas Priest to unprecedented levels. While British Steel marked a significant advancement in commercial heavy metal, Defenders of the Faith, released in 1984, reintroduced the genre's weight and intensity. This era, in conjunction with Turbo, 1986, and Ram It Down, 1988, signified Judas Priest's readiness to innovate. Although Turbo incited debate due to its synth-driven glam metal influences, Ram It Down unequivocally demonstrated that they had not forsaken their metal origins. Nonetheless, all their prior efforts appeared to be mere groundwork for Painkiller, 1990, an album esteemed as one of heavy metal's quintessential masterpieces. This was the moment when Downing and Tipton exerted maximum effort. The riffs in Painkiller possessed the intensity of a tempest. The solos were unyielding, and the aggression was unparalleled. No evidence of hard rock influences or any other genre was present. This was unadulterated heavy metal at its most intense. Yet just as Judas Priest reached their absolute peak, things began to fall apart. In 1992, Rob Halford left the band, leaving behind an irreplaceable void. While the remaining members tried to carry on with Tim "Ripper" Owens, Judas Priest was no longer the same. Downing kept playing, kept writing, but deep down, he knew something was missing. The synergy between Halford, Downing, and Tipton was the true essence of Judas Priest, and with one piece gone, the balance was broken. In 2003, Halford returned, bringing hope that Judas Priest could reclaim their former glory. But by then, something had changed in K.K. Downing. Years of internal tension, pressure from management, and his increasingly strained relationship with Glenn Tipton made him feel alienated from the band. Even as Judas Priest continued to release albums and embark on successful tours, Downing began contemplating something he had never considered before: leaving Judas Priest. In 2011, as the band prepared for the Epitaph tour, Downing made a decision that sent shockwaves through the metal world. he left Judas Priest after more than 40 years. There was no farewell concert, no final performance to thank the fans, just a letter announcing that he would not be joining the tour. For many, it was a shocking departure, but for Downing, it was inevitable. The tensions had lasted too long, and he felt increasingly unappreciated within the very band he had helped build. Initially, Judas Priest stated that he left for personal reasons, but the truth was far more complex. Downing later revealed that his departure stemmed from long-standing conflicts with Glenn Tipton, disagreements with management, and a deep-seated feeling of being sidelined within the band he had dedicated his life to. Unlike previous lineup changes, Judas Priest made no effort to convince him to stay. Instead, they immediately replaced him with Richie Falk, a much younger guitarist, and showed no intention of inviting Downing back, not even as a guest. This decision sparked outrage among longtime fans, who questioned whether Judas Priest could still retain its soul after replacing one of its founding pillars so easily. From a poor boy in West Bromwich, a homeless wanderer, to a heavy metal legend, KK. Downing had lived it all. But was this truly the end of his story? Or was there still another chapter waiting to be written? Personal life. On stage, KK. Downing was a wild, fiery guitarist, igniting crowds of tens of thousands with his powerful riffs and electrifying stage presence. But once he stepped away from the lights, he was a completely different person, reserved, quiet, and somewhat solitary. Throughout his peak years with Judas Priest, Downing was never the kind of rock star who indulged in excessive partying like many of his contemporaries. While there were times when he succumbed to the rock and roll lifestyle of alcohol and celebrations, it was never a long-term way of life for him. Downing never married and never had children. His personal life was almost a blank slate in the media. No high-profile relationships, no scandals like many other rock musicians. For him, music seemed to be the only enduring love of his life. When he left Judas Priest in 2011, KK. Downing believed he could finally enjoy a peaceful life after more than 4 decades with the band. He had invested heavily in Asbury Hall Golf Course, an ambitious project that aimed to transform his private estate into a high-end golf resort and tourist destination. It was not just a financial investment, but his second dream outside of music, a legacy he hoped to build beyond Judas Priest. However, reality did not align with his expectations. The project suffered severe financial losses, leading Downing into a crisis. With no other choice, he was forced to sell Asbury Hall, a property he had poured his heart and soul into for years. To make matters worse, he also had to sell his royalty rights to Judas Priest songs, a devastating decision, as it was not just his source of income, but the very works he had dedicated his life to creating. From a heavy metal legend, Downing suddenly found himself facing a harsh reality. No band, no career, no assets. Despite everything, he still held on to hope for a return. When Glenn Tipton was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, Downing believed it was his chance to reunite with Judas Priest. With Tipton's condition affecting his ability to perform, Downing thought he would be invited back to fill the void. But Judas Priest shut the door on him completely. Instead of bringing him back, they chose to continue touring without him, enlisting Andy Sneap as a temporary replacement for Tipton. For Downing, this was a crushing blow. Not just because he was denied a return, but because it confirmed that the band he had helped build had completely turned its back on him. He later admitted that this was the moment he knew the door to Judas Priest was permanently closed. But Downing refused to let his career end this way. In 2019, after nearly a decade of silence, he announced his return with a new project, KK's Priest. A band he formed alongside Tim "Ripper" Owens, the former Judas Priest vocalist who had replaced Halford during his absence. KK's Priest was not Judas Priest, but for Downing, it was the only way to continue his legacy. His comeback sparked division within the metal community. Some die-hard Judas Priest fans dismissed KK's Priest as a second-rate imitation, arguing that without Halford or Tipton, it was nothing more than a nostalgia act. But his supporters saw it differently. They viewed it as a justified effort to preserve the spirit of Judas Priest, the very band he had helped create but was later cast aside from. Regardless of success or failure, KK's Priest proved one thing. KK Downing never truly left heavy metal. After everything he had been through, he still picked up his guitar, still stood on stage, and still fought for the music that had defined his entire life. And while Judas Priest moved forward without him, K.K. Downing carved his own path, a new chapter in his story, written by his own hands. Present life and legacy. After more than half a century dedicated to heavy metal, K.K. Downing still isn't ready to put down his guitar. Now in his 70s, though no longer a part of Judas Priest, he continues to play music, carrying the warrior spirit of a resilient guitarist. He no longer seeks fame or validation from those who turned their backs on him. Instead, he plays for passion, for the metal that runs through his veins, something he has never been able to abandon. Currently, Downing remains active with KK's Priest, the band he formed to keep the spirit of traditional heavy metal alive. While this project may never have the same influence as Judas Priest, for Downing, it represents freedom and full creative control over his music. He released Sermons of the Sinner, 2021, an album deeply rooted in the golden era of Judas Priest, serving as a clear statement that he has never lost his ability to write and perform. KK's Priest continues to tour, and while he may no longer play on the grand stages of his Judas Priest days, Downing still gives his all, just as he always has. For the most part, however, he now lives a quiet life. After losing Astbury Hall Golf Course, Downing has no other business ventures distracting him from music. He leads a simple lifestyle, spending his time composing, interacting with his loyal fans, and occasionally appearing at rock events. However, one undeniable truth remains. Judas Priest has never acknowledged him as a significant part of the band since his departure. The cold distance between him and his former bandmates continues to this day, leaving many fans saddened by a relationship that should have been celebrated, not erased. Despite everything, K.K. Downing's legacy is undeniable. He was not just a member of Judas Priest, he was one of the architects of Judas Priest. The legendary dual guitar approach he developed with Glenn Tipton characterized the band's sound and established a model for heavy metal. In his absence, Judas Priest may not have attained their significant success, and the genre itself might not have transformed into the formidable, incisive force it is today. His impact transcends Judas Priest, molding an entire generation of guitarists. Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, James Hetfield of Metallica, Zakk Wylde, Ozzy Osbourne, as well as Adrian Smith and Dave Murray of Iron Maiden, have all derived inspiration from the playing style established by Downing and Tipton. Their dynamic guitar collaboration established the groundwork for contemporary heavy metal, especially thrash metal, which bands such as Metallica, Slayer, and Megadeth would subsequently elevate to new heights. In addition to technique, Downing's stage presence significantly shaped the archetype of a quintessential heavy metal guitarist. He wields the flying V guitar, his long hair cascading under the stage lights, and adopts his distinctive headbanging posture during intense solos. These elements constituted the visual essence of an archetypal metal guitarist. The contemporary archetype of a heavy metal guitarist was, in part, influenced by K.K. Defeating. Nonetheless, a regrettable facet of his legacy is the absence of acknowledgement in Judas Priest's official history. In 2022, the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, K.K. Downing received an invitation but did not attain any special acknowledgement. This incited considerable outrage among fans, who contended that Judas Priest would not have achieved its distinctive identity without him. Despite a brief shared performance with his former bandmates, the separation between him and the band was evident. K.K. Downing, although no longer affiliated with Judas Priest, continues to be a legendary figure in heavy metal. His contributions are indelible, and although Judas Priest advances without him, he has established a distinct legacy that persists through KK's Priest and the impact he has imparted on successive generations of musicians. He may not have achieved a prominent solo career akin to Ozzy Osbourne, nor does his name pervade discussions like the guitarists of Metallica or Iron Maiden. However, for those who genuinely value heavy metal, K.K. Downing is an indispensable component of rock history. What is your opinion on K.K. Downing's tumultuous odyssey? Do you consider Judas Priest to retain its identity without him, or was his exit an unavoidable aspect of evolution? Do you endorse his return with KK's Priest, or do you believe his rightful position will perpetually reside within Judas Priest? Please provide your insights in the comments section below. Remember to like and subscribe to remain informed about additional inspiring narratives concerning the legends of rock and metal.